Yeah, that'll change in a bit. Oh. Plus, there's hopefully a whole lot of people online.
What's that?
I say, hopefully there are a bunch of people online.
So Katrina, if you were
It's
the
at the
only,
very
are
top.
you,
Very
is
first thing.
Katrina the only soprano tonight?
Yeah.
Do you want to scoot over there and then we can all sit
yeah,
in the
that makes
row?
sense.
Yeah, and I suggest I'll make like, you know, like all this good, just sing a melody. You don't have to have an alto. It'll help the congregation, it'll help the whole live stream thing if we're singing.
Okay.
Okay.
So
sure.
no alto.
Don't worry about the alto line on those things.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
I just practiced those on my way over, but that's okay.
Okay then.
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah. Yeah, like that.
Dropping like flies.
Choose your own adventure. My granddaughter, the 3.5-year-old, went into our bedroom and we've got a shelf on the wall, the whole
Oh, just because of this.
width of the bedroom that's just paperbacks that Bob and I,
used to start at 6.
that we've read and we like and we want to keep. And she picked all of my, I guess when I was in college, I read Drag the Dragon series by Andrew Caffrey. So she brings all these books, and they're like 300 to 600 pages. They're paperbacks, so you don't realize how big they are. No pictures. Read me about the dragon, Grandma.
It's got pictures on the front.
Yeah. Yeah, a beautiful illustration on the cover.
So you have to make up a story?
No, I told her, look
Wow.
at this last page. Can you tell me those numbers? I said, you have to read from left to right. That's starting over here. It's that one. Yeah.
But then again, I haven't we haven't mentioned the idea of visiting in Chicago.
His brother-in-law, Adam, was a young man, just got home, and was with the kids. So now they're even more strict. They won't even let his parents, who live 10 minutes away, in their house.
Wow. See,
Yeah,
we were
she's
the
sick.
whole coast by and large,
she's sick?
which was our trip.
She said she has a headache.
It's
and
still
something
pretty
bothering
good,
her,
and
and
it
I
was
said,
even better during our trip.
So I said, maybe I'll say more. I said, well, if you're feeling any more, you better go ahead and
No,
rapid
like I
test.
say,
Yes.
Yeah.
Governor Bashir of Kentucky just called the legislature special session
If she
to
can't
do
smell.
restrictions.
And she was supposed to fly to Boston.
Yes.
Right to the Boston, right, exactly. She said she doesn't think she has COVID. She said, I haven't been around him. I have to have
The lights work out. How did the lights work out?
Oh, that worked out fine. Good. I've had a hard time with the little ones, so the housing doesn't come out that easily. I have to pry about them. I just don't want to damage the ceiling. I may have to use some
A little bit of plaster. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, but it worked out fine.
Great.
I just feel like stuff from supper, and then I made a very good
A
feast
couple of
for the
times when I
holidays.
took out the old housing,
Thing came
and a
down.
little bit, I had to prop it back up.
We had all kinds of these for supper tonight.
Conform to the switch.
The plain things that I made canned green beans and steamed broccoli for the kids because those are two vegetables that they'll eat. And then I made a vegetarian hummus because I'm vegetarian instead of meat with onions and chickpeas and herbs on the bottom layer instead of meat. And then I also took
What was wrong with the rabbi guys?
carrot and sweet potato section that I could set aside just for the kids. So I made that with some brown sugar for the kids. So that was their 3 vegetables. And Tammy, our oldest, made spinach Leekkuchen, which was good. And she made homemade apple raisin challah, which was delicious. And Bob made chicken and brisket because our oldest and most of the kids like beef. And our youngest will eat any kind of meat, and his kids will eat any kind of meat, but they really like beef. And our middle one only eats chicken. And he went to the kosher butcher. He went to kosher Kroger, and Amy was working there that day, and they didn't have a lot of brisket. She said, "Why don't you get brisket and chicken?" And it worked out perfect because he was just planning on getting brisket and just making one thing. He ended up making 2. It was a huge one.
I've been making challah lately, and I decided to make an apple, dandelion honey challah. Yeah. No, it was an apple date challah. Definitely a technique to stuff in the challah. But it was neat.
We begin with the words of Ashreinu, Matov Chelkenu, how fortunate we are, how goodly is our lot. Shana Tova and welcome. I am Rabbi Noah Farrow, and on behalf of myself, as well as the congregation, our Board of Trustees, our President Bill Friedman, I welcome you all to Northern Hills Synagogue, whether physically in person or joining us remotely by stream, as we welcome 5782. May it be a good year for us. I'll invite Margaret Ackerman forward for our first reading, which is located on page 5 in the upper left.
Beginning to pray, where do I begin? Where do I find God? How do I begin to pray? There is a Tselem, Elohim, an image of God implanted in me. The image of God is found in myself, in whom God breathes Nishmat Bayim, the divine breath of life. In each of us is Nishma, a soul whose origin is God. In prayer, I enter into my deepest parts of myself, discover who I am, and touch God's presence.
We'll rise for Baruch Hu on page 5.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam. Umavir yom, umevi laila, uavdil ben yom uvein laila, Adonai tzvaot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamid imoch aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hamari v'aravim. Ahavat olam be'Yisrael, amcha haftal. Torah, mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, b'shofeinu v'kumeinu, nasiach v'chukecha, v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha, u'v'mitzvotecha, le'olam va'ed. Ki hem chayenu be'orech yameinu, be'orech yameinu, u'vahem nehege yomam v'layla, yomam v'layla. Ve'avatcha al tasir mimenu olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai echad. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, v'chol levavcha, v'chol nafshecha, v'chol me'odecha, v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, asher anochi metzavcha, hayom al levanecha, v'shinantam levanecha, v'divarta bam, v'shibtecha v'etecha, v'lechtecha v'derech, v'b'shachbecha v'kumecha, v'kshartam leot al yadecha, v'hayu tevachot b'neinecha, v'chtavtam al mezuzot beitecha, v'visharecha. Adonai Elohechem emet.
We'll resume together in the middle of page 8.
Umalchuto veratzon kiblu alehem Moshe uvenei Yisrael lechanu shira b'simcha rabah ve'amru chulam mikamocha Elohim Adonai mikamocha midam hakodesh Malchucha ra'uvanecha b'keyam lifnei Moshe ze'eli anu ve'ameru Adonai le'olam va'ed. Shene'emar, Kifada Adonai Yaakov, Ugalo miad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
We'll read responsively on page 9 in the English. Allow us, Adonai, our God, to sleep peacefully and to awaken again to life, our sovereign.
Spread over us your canopy of peace. Restore us with your good counsel, and save us for the sake of your name.
Shield us, remove from us enemies and pestilence, sword, starvation, and sorrow, and remove the evil forces that surround us.
Shelter us in the shadow of your wings, for you, God, watch over and deliver us, and you are the sovereign, merciful, and compassionate.
Ensure our going and coming for life and peace now and forever.
May you spread over us your canopy of peace.
Baruch atah Adonai, who spreads the canopy of peace over us, over all the people of Israel, and over Jerusalem.
Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom.
Turn to page 10.
Tiku v'chodesh shofar, Tiku v'chodesh shofar, Tiku v'chodesh shofar, v'kesel yom kagenu, v'kesel yom kagenu. Yigada v'ikada shemei Rabbah, Be'amad yirach yirteh, Be'amlich malchut, Be'amlich malchut, Be'amad yirach yirteh, Be'amlich malchuteh, B'chayechon u'vyomechon u'b'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael b'gala u'bizman kari v'imru Amen. Yehi Shmei Barach, Vishvabach, Vipar, Vitram, Mam Vitnase, Vitadar, Vitale, Vitala, Shemeda Kudesha, Breathe. Le'ela, ule'ela, min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, Damiran bel ma'a v'imru. Amen.
We continue with a silent Amidah, starting on page 11.
Chaim bracha v'shalom u'parnasa tova nizacher v'nikateh v'chanecha Anachnu l'chol amacha beit Yisrael L'chaim tovim u'shalom L'na'aseh hashalom
Read together on page 17, the top of the page. My God, keep my tongue from evil, my lips from lies. Help me ignore those who slander me. Let me be humble before all. Open my heart to your Torah, that I may pursue your mitzvot. Frustrate the designs of those who plot evil against me. Make nothing of their schemes. Act for the sake of your name, your power, your holiness, and your Torah. Answer my prayer for the deliverance of your people. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. May the one who brings peace to the universe bring peace to us and to all the people of Israel and to all who dwell on earth. Amen. Amen. You rise on page 19.
Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabbah. Amen. Ve'alma divrach yiruteh ve'amlich malchuteh v'chayechon uvyamechon u'v'chayed echol be'Yisrael v'agala uvizman kariv v'imeru. Amen. Amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevorach ve'olam me'almaya yitbarach. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithada v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudesha brichu le'ela le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran ve'alma v'imeru. Amen. Amen. Tikabal tzadhon uva'utahon dechol Yisrael kadamavuhon divishmaya ve'imeru. Amen. Amen. Yehi shlam rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imeru. Amen.
Page 20. Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz, v'haaretz hayta tohu v'avohu v'choshech al pnei tehom, v'ruach Elohim merachefet al pnei hamayim. Vayomer Elohim yihi or, vayhi or. Vayar Elohim et haor ki tov. Vayabdel Elohim bein haor u'bein hachoshech. Vayikra Elohim laor yom, v'lachoshech kara layla. Vayhi erev vayhi boker yom echad.
From the Torah, the first day of creation. When God began to create heaven and earth, the earth was unformed and void. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God swept over the water. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day.
ויקרא אלוהים את האדם בצלמו, בצלם אלוהים ברא אותו, זכר ונקבה ברא אותם. ויברך אותם אלוהים ויאמר להם אלוהים פרו ורבו ומילאו את הארץ וכיבשוה ורדו בדגת הים ובעוף השמיים ובכל חיה הרומסת על הארץ. וירא אלוהים את כל אשר עשה והנה טוב מאוד. ויהי ערב ויהי בוקר יום שישי.
From the Torah, the sixth day of creation. And God made human beings in God's image. Thus were they created. God created them male and female, and God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and conquer it, rule over the fish of the sea, the birds of the heavens, and all living things that crawl on earth." And God saw that all that had been done and thought it very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day.
On page 22, in your image you fashioned us. You owe us your presence.
We need to bow down to you, ask your forgiveness, hold you responsible for the unfair and the ugly.
We need to return to you, hold you accountable for what defies comprehension, that we may turn to you more fervently, with gratitude for the seasons and the stars and the day and the night.
We are humbled by the wonder of the world, grateful for the gift of thought, grateful for our dreams, our hopes, grateful for our never-ending illusions, grateful for these beautiful souls that transcend death.
God of the faithless, God of the faithful, God in all forms and formless, who was and who is and who will be, you are the eternal one.
Thank you. Page 23. Yehi ratzon milfanecha Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu. May it be your will, Adonai, our God and God of our ancestors, that the year 5782 be one of balanced and mindful growth for us as individuals, for our families, and for our communities. May we return next year in good health and in appreciation of a year of greater peace, a year in which we deepened our lives through learning and the performance of mitzvot, a year in which we were conscious of the divine presence, a year in which we strengthened our shared commitment to tikkun olam, the betterment of the world. Turn to page 24.
Kiddush
We need a Kiddush cup.
Well.
We can,
Well,
I can speak while we're getting the Kiddush cup. We'll turn to page 24 in just a few minutes. I was told by a colleague that when speaking this high holiday season, I needed to do two things. I needed to make them laugh and make them cry. So I figured I would tell you that only the first hour of my remarks is going to be entirely in Hebrew. The second one will be mostly in English. There we go.
2 verses, 1 stone.
Here's a story some of you may have heard before, or something like it. A woman goes to visit her rabbi one Friday afternoon. The rabbi's secretary tells her that the rabbi will be with her shortly. She's sitting outside his office with a basket on her lap and a very anxious expression on her face when a yeshiva student comes in. He recognizes her, offers a few words of greeting, and notices her worried face. "Is everything all right?" he asks. She sighs. "It's this chicken," she says. "I got it from the butcher, but when I got it home and my sister saw it, she said it probably wasn't kosher, so I came to ask the rabbi." The student glances at the rabbi's office door. "Well," he says, "I've studied the laws of kashrut with the rabbi backwards and forwards. Why don't I take a look for you so you don't have to wait?" The woman agrees. She uncovers the basket, and the student looks over the chicken carcass. He examines it carefully for a couple of minutes before finally handing it back to her. "I'm sorry," he says. "Your sister was right. This chicken isn't kosher." The woman begins to cry. "It was supposed to feed us all during Shabbat," she says. "What am I supposed to do?" Just then, the rabbi's door opens. He seems to have overheard some of the conversation, and he waves the woman into his office. The student watches as she takes the basket and enters the office, and she and the rabbi talk too low to hear and look over the chicken for a while. At last, she shouts, "It is? Oh, thank you so much, Rabbi." And she emerges, still holding her basket, now smiling. She bids the secretary and the yeshiva student a good Shabbos, and she leaves. The student turns to his rabbi, dumbfounded, and says, "I don't understand. What could you have possibly seen in that chicken that made it kosher?" "You saw the chicken," the rabbi answers. "I saw the woman." I'll admit that in telling this story, I have certain misgivings. First of all, what was a rabbi doing in his office on a Friday afternoon? I mean, seriously, rookie mistake right there. But also, as a student and a practitioner of halakha, Jewish law, I am dying to know, was the chicken kosher or not? In other words, did the rabbi in the story tell the woman to violate the laws of kashrut, the dietary law, unwittingly as some sort of a kindness to her? What's going on here? And the next thing I'm going to say is a pearl clutcher of a bit, so please do get your pearls ready. And if you don't have pearls of your own, maybe borrow some pearls from someone else, with proper social distancing, of course. If the rabbi did tell her to violate the laws of kashrut without her knowledge in order to feed her family a chicken that may have been slaughtered improperly, maybe it doesn't really matter. To whom would it matter, after all? Not to her or her family. They have the rabbi's assurance that what they're eating is permitted and it's okay. He's the expert. Not to the rabbi himself. He's apparently made his ruling and made peace with it, comfortable bearing the responsibility there. Not to the community at large. They will know nothing of the methodology employed in this instance, the reason for the choice to be permissive here rather than to be strict. Only, perhaps, maybe, to the yeshiva student, who really ought to be prepared to accept his Rebbe's ruling and authority, but, some doubts may linger, which maybe only goes to show that a little knowledge is indeed a dangerous thing after all. In the real world, in our actual world, outside of the narrative realm of this story, I can be most confident that while the question of this hypothetical chicken's status maybe matters to hosts of now deceased rabbis from the 1st through 21st centuries, it probably matters very little indeed to God. I know, it sounds like an unlikely thing for a rabbi to say, and it probably undermines my own job security, but I'm not sure how much God there really is in that systematic approach to Jewish living. We may use Jewish law as a tool to give us greater awareness of God, of God's presence, to attune us to God's will, to take simple acts of eating and drinking and lying down and rising up and walking on our way, and to imbue them with holiness, ideally. We can even dig deep to look for special meaning in the finest details of certain laws and certain practices in order to enhance their beauty and their relevance for us. But we should remember, so many of our customs, rules, so many of the meanings that we ascribe to them are most certainly products of human creativity and human imagination. They are our attempt to draw close to God by imposing norms and obligations upon ourselves. We read in the seasonal psalm, Psalm 27, L'cha amar libi bakshu fanai et panecha Adonai avakesh, which translates, as many of you may know, to meaning of Hebrew uncertain. Our best guess is, on your behalf, my heart says, seek my face. Your face, O Hashem, shall I seek. Through religious and spiritual practices, we are angling for dveikut, an intimate kind of clinging to God. But our rules, our study, rigidity, these aren't the only way to achieve this closeness, and they aren't always the best way either. They can be very helpful, however, in preserving the integrity of the Jewish people. The study of Torah and the Hebrew language, the laws of kashrut and Shabbat, marriage and divorce, prayer and ritual, these help us to maintain cohesion as a community and rootedness as individual practitioners of Jewish culture, when they don't get in the way, that is. The conservative movement has long recognized the potential for a rigid kind of devotion to halachic observance to keep people away from both God and Jewish community, rather than to draw them nearer. It was in this spirit that the famous rabbinic tshuva, the rabbinic letter, appeared in 1950, allowing for the use of electricity and automobiles on Shabbat. It was in this spirit that Rabbi Eli Kaplan Spitz offered a tshuva in 2000, outlining why and how the laws around the category of mamzerim, children resulting from forbidden relationships, should no longer be operational in any contemporary Jewish community. Peanuts on Pesach, same-sex marriage, Shabbat services with music and computer screens, vinegar produced without rabbinic supervision. This is the hedonistic chaos that halachic innovation can lead to. I know, no one ever wants to hear a rabbi being sarcastic from the pulpit. I apologize. But that's part of the problem, isn't it? Religious people were supposed to be serious, uncompromising, rigid, not supposed to have a sense of humor. We're supposed to be devoted to lifting humanity up and making everything about the rules and the system and the ideals. And if religious people acknowledge, even for a moment, that those ideals are just a guess, maybe not even always a very good guess, or that those rules are just an attempt to gather together the sorts of values and principles we ought to be striving for, well, who's holding the sky up then? Who's keeping the earth from spinning out into the void? I hate to break it to you. You are. I don't want to overstate my case. God has a big role to play here as well, but it's up to you whether or not you cling to God. It's up to you whether or not you try to make meaning out of the laws and practices and ideas that have come down to you precisely as they are, or you try to transform them, to let them move and inspire you in new ways. Or you leave them alone and you let them languish without you. Or, worse yet, maybe you take them on so you can go through the motions and make sure they can't get at your heart. When it first appeared on the scene, conservative Judaism offered something that neither Reform nor Orthodoxy did. It affirmed a standard of traditional practice that individual people were permitted not to meet. There was a right way to be Jewish, but the Jews in the pews wouldn't always be up to it. It was like a big party, and as long as we kept the music going, the dancing would go on forever, and eventually everyone would have the opportunity to stop standing on the sidelines and watching and actually join in. What the last 100 or so years have taught us, however, is a different lesson. Having a right way to do Jewish, l'chatchila, initially, from the outset, isn't always a real, genuine, open invitation to people. Consider the metaphor I just used, a dance, where the music goes on forever. The assumption would seem to be that once someone knows how to dance, and once they feel like dancing, then they'll dance away. Once they know how to live a Jewish life and they're inspired to do so, they will. From this perspective, the only obstacles are skill and will, two things that, in theory, lie in the would-be dancer's ability to change. But to extend the metaphor, what if the person you'd like to see dancing is blind or deaf? What if they're paralyzed or for some other reason cannot move, cannot walk? Or what if they suffer from crippling social anxiety, and at home with the curtains drawn they can dance away with reckless abandon, but here in public, no thank you. For some of us, knowing that Judaism maintains a sense of order and norms is incredibly helpful. It gives us courage and support. We want to see the dance go on, even if we ourselves drift in and out of it from time to time. But not everyone works that way. Not everyone is going to dance. Some people are just going to treat it like a spectator sport and watch. Some are going to be elsewhere, talking or playing games. Some will hang out over by the punch bowl. And quite a lot will probably be crammed into the kitchen, not practicing social distancing. The problem with so many of our halachically observant communities is that the focus remains on l'chatchila, the ideal, while we really always live in a world of b'di'avad, the reality that falls short. Our high standards often arise because many of us are plagued by a kind of anxiety about Judaism's integrity and survival that we're constantly seeking to dispel. But if we want Judaism to remain practicable and viable, perhaps it's time to let ourselves be uncomfortable for the sake of others. We read in the Talmud in Sanhedrin 106b, HaKadosh Baruch Hu liba bayit. God seeks the heart. This simple and beautiful statement comes out of the Gemara's attempt to understand how it could be that the Aramaic sage Rav Yehuda fell far short of being an ideal scholar, and yet God took very special note of him. We read, when Rav Yehuda would remove one of his shoes during a drought, the rain would fall. We cry out and no one notices us. Rather, the Holy One, blessed be He, seeks the heart, as it is written in 1 Samuel, that Hashem looks to the heart. In recent years, a number of serious discussions have broken out in conservative and other spaces about certain aspects of traditional practice. How can we be more flexible and inclusive in our use of certain technologies on Shabbat and holidays? How can we be more flexible and inclusive in our recognition of the spectrum of gender identities and other identities that we affirm in our society today? How can we offer compassionate, learner-centered introductions to Torah and Talmud that don't dumb down our rich textual tradition? And should we continue to observe forever everything that's been added to our calendar over the course of the last 2,000 years? Minor fast days and extra diaspora holidays, which prior generations added. Or to bring it a little closer to home here at Northern Hills, how often should we gather for services? What, if anything, is our potluck policy? Will we ever perform interfaith weddings? And are we always going to read a full Torah reading every Saturday morning? These kinds of issues are not completely separate from our anxieties about the survival of Judaism or the survival of our particular traditions. But raising them isn't an indication that we've given up our ideals or that we're circling the drain. We shouldn't assume that the answers to these questions are going to take us any further away from traditional observance, nor should we assume that they will be entirely in line with what we're already doing either. God seeks the heart, and so should we. We should be looking at people and not at chickens. Shana Tova. And here come the flowers. We'll continue on page 24 with our Kiddush. Please rise. Thank you.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagathen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am v'romamanu mikol lashon v'kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'atitem lanu Adonai Eloheinu be'ahava et yom hazikaron hazeh yom teruah mikra kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim udvarcha emet v'kayam lad Baruch atah Adonai melech al kol ha'aretz mekadesh Yisrael v'yom hazikaron.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'echianu
We remain standing as we turn to page 25 for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol latet gedula liotzer breishit Shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot hadama, Shelo sam chelkenu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishpachotim hadli, lifnei melech, malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kakatu Petoratecha Adonai Yimloch Le'elam Va'ed V'ne'emar V'haya Adonai Le'melech al kol haaretz V'yom hahu Yeh Adonai echad U'shemo
Turn now to page 27. Page 27?
Yeah, you want only a copy?
Hashalti met Adonai otavakesh. Hashalti met Adonai otavakesh. Shiti b'veit Adonai kol yamei chayai. L'chazon b'noam Adonai u'levaker b'heikalo. L'chazon b'noam Adonai u'levaker b'heikalo. Lilehem antiler bit tuv Adonai ve'eretz chaim kavel Adonai chazak ve'ametz libecha ve'kavel Adonai.
We will turn back to page 26 for the Mourner's Kaddish Kaddish Yatom. Note that our congregation does not observe any yahrzeits on Rosh Hashanah, at least not on my congregational list. However, there are yahrzeits coming up this week, those of Lee Zucker, Sonia Kvartina Mazer, Albert Goldman, Joseph Nabolsky, Barbara Gelbart, Ellen Ganson, Sarah Roth, and Robert Levin. We think at this time of those whom we have lost in this congregation over the last year, among them Sandy Schramm, Helene Katz, Evelyn Seltzer, Pat Keeler, Marge Reiter, Amy Perlman, Norm Epstein, Paul Bassa, Steve Blyer, Bernie Kiwi, Ron Kabikoff, Dan Geyer, Charles Albright, Bernie Slavitt, and Elaine Beagleson. If there is anyone else that you are thinking of at this time, in addition to those names, anyone I did not mention and you'd like to share their name, I'll invite you to do so at this time. If you are reciting Kaddish, whether you are joining us here in person or joining us by stream, I will invite you to join me now. We're on page 26. Yitgadal v'kadash shmei Rabba.
Amen.
V'alma divra kirutech v'yamlich malchutech v'chayeichon v'yomeichon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael v'agala v'zman kari v'imur amen. Yehi shmei Rabba v'rach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei v'kudsha v'richu la'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tush v'chata v'nechamata da'amiran ba'alama v'imur amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom v'imrama hu ya'asei shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Announcements. Well, first, I hope you all enjoyed the procession to present our beautiful high holiday flowers. They're brought to you by Karen and Joe Lazier and by Lois Pornoy, and they are truly gorgeous. They are emblematic of a theme that we began exploring with Rabbi Farrow over the last 2 weeks as we approached the end of Deuteronomy, the end of Devarim, where, as we saw almost 20 weeks ago, where the Jews received the Torah. Here we are, 600,000 Jews, the new generation, on the plains just east of the land of Israel. And they were summoned by Moses to do something which some scholars originally thought as superfluous, to renew a covenant. And we have explored the nature of that covenant. And over our coming year, we too have the opportunity to renew that very special covenant. The covenant that includes not only us as members and part of the community of Northern Hills Synagogue, but as part of a broader Jewish community in Cincinnati, in the United States and worldwide, and as part of a broader covenant of humanity, all of whom we hope are committed to living in peace with one another, in learning how doing the mitzvot enrich our lives. And over the next couple of days, why don't we explore that in some depth? So, here you have your opportunity. Tomorrow morning, Tuesday, September 7th, we'll begin our Rosh Hashanah Day 1 morning service at 9 a.m. The Torah service will take place at approximately, and that is a large caveat, anyone who takes this as a Sermon on the Mount does so at his or her own risk, takes place at around 9:45 a.m. We'll have a family tashlik and family mincha service at Kotel Park at 4 p.m. Our services continue on Wednesday, September the 8th. Our Day 2 Rosh Hashanah service begins at 9 a.m. And as Rabbi Farrow recently informed all of us, we've scheduled visits to our 2 primary cemeteries in the area to conduct cemetery services between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. They will both take place at 2 p.m. on Sunday, September the 12th. In Montgomery at United Jewish Cemeteries, that will be led by Rabbi Shapira, and in Covedale at the Northern Hills Cemetery, led by Rabbi Farrow. And there we have it.
Thank you. We'll turn to page 28 for Yigdal.
Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach Nimtzah et el tzituto Echad ben yachid ki yichudo Ne'elam v'gam ein sof le'achduto Ein lo demut haguf ve'eino guf Lo na'arach elav kedushato Kadmon l'chol davar asher nivra Rishon mein Rishit leReshito Hino Adon Olam Bechol Notzar Gvurato Umalchuto Shefan Nevuato Netano El Anshe Segulato Vetifarto Lokam B'Yisrael Kemosheo Navi Lavit Et Munato Torah Natan Le'amoel Al Yad Le'vio Neman Beito Yachal Michael Velo Yamir Dato Ve'olamim Zulato Tzofer Yodea Zetarenu Mabik L'sof Davar V'kod Mato Gomer Ish Chesed Yemifalo Notem L'Rashara Kerishato Yishlach V'ketz Yamin B'shichenu V'ifdot Mechakeketz Yeshuato Metim Yechayel V'rochasto Baruch Adei Shem Divato Metim Yechayel V'rochasto Baruch Adei Shem Tehilato. Shana Tova.
Yehi ratzon milchanecha, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu. May it be your will, God of our fathers and our mothers, that the year ahead brings a pervasive and complete peace on the inhabitants of all the earth, beyond all the dreams of humanity. L'shana tova tikatevu v'techatemu. May you all be inscribed and sealed for a good year. Shana tova.
Shana Tova.
Thank you, Bill.
Oh, these mics are off.
She gets a rabbit and it's hanging
Yeah. I can't do it. Matt did it. Matt brought it here. He can send it back. Matt?
What?
Can help bring it.
Yep.
Oh yeah, Ben and I want to drop off some food at your house.
Oh, okay. Good idea.